So alright guys, so we have something called variable scope, and this is what it means. It means what limitation does your variable have? Yes, you already have a variable. So for example, we have a president. So whenever the president make an order or a demand about the country, so it must be strictly followed, right? Then we have a state governor, whenever an order or a command is passed by the state governor, it must be followed by those that are meant to execute that order strictly within that state, right? Presidents have power over the whole country, right? Including the states in that country. So the state governor have power over the whole states, including the cities in the states, right? So then we have a local government chairman, right? So the power of a local government chairman is limited in that particular local government area, right? So that is that, or county, whatever you can think of, right? So now, also, so we have the father in the family, right? And the power of the father, or the authority of the father, is limited within the household, right? So one father of family of, let's say, McDonald, cannot command or cannot try to be authoritative in another family. His power is limited within his family, right? Because he is the head of a particular family. So if you move out of his family, circle, and decide to be authoritative in another family, he won't be recognized. In fact, he might be charged for trespassing, right? So now let's bring it down to MQL4. So like I said, we have a president whose authoritative is just within the boundary of the country. So a country president cannot just give a command to another country that, okay, all of you in this country, you should be paying this particular percentage of tax. No, 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 no. It's not allowed unless they have been colonized by that country. So automatically, when you are colonizing somebody, that means you are already taking over the country. So you are more like the president of that country. So, but the moment you are not, they are not under you, so there's no point going from your own country to another country trying to be authoritative or give a command. No, no, you won't be respected. So that means you are going beyond your boundary. So we have the local scope, and we have, okay, let me have this. So let's say scope of variables, right? So first thing first, we have the local variable, right? We have the global variables, right? So for now, let's stick with this. So now, what is a local variable? A local variable is any variable that you declare. So now you understand what I mean by declare. Just like you are saying the first time you are specifying the data type to a particular variable. That is when you declare the variable, right? So now, a local variable is a variable that is declared within a scope or within a block of code. So what is a block of code, or what is a scope? So for example, any point, any boundary that is surrounded by coily braces. For example, this is a coily brace. So you can see, let me try to zoom close. Hold on. So let me try to increase this so I can see. You can see this is a coily brace. So anything inside this coily brace, so within this coily brace, that is a scope, right? So let's assume we have this, we have something here, we have something here, then in here we now have another thing, we can also have another scope, so this is another scope, right? And this is one scope. So that is that on scope. Now you understand what I mean by scope. It is something, it is like a boundary, something, anything encapsulated in a particular, in an opening and closing coily brace. So that is one scope, right? So now let me reduce this so that you can see better. So now that is that on scope, right? So if a variable is declared under a coily brace, so it means it is a local variable. If a command is given by a state governor, that means the command must be executed within all the cities, the urban part, the rural part of that particular state, within that state, right? So that is a local variable. So when is a variable global? So this is when a variable is declared in a space or in a place where it is independent of any parentheses, any coily parentheses or any coily brackets, right? So for example, if you declare a variable here, so let's say I declare my age here. Of course, this is not my age. So let's assume I declare the age here. Okay, sorry, I do not need to declare and assign, right? So let's assume I just declare or declare and assign whatever. So far, this is declared here. So if I declare this here, so I can access it here, I can access it outside this scope, I can access it anywhere within the script. But let's assume this was declared inside. So let's assume I have this, maybe first name, right? So this particular variable is local. This is local, right? And this is global. So this is more like the president, right? This is the president, and this is a state governor, right? So the power of this guy is within this reach and also inside this reach, right? But the power of this guy, this variable, is just within this coily brace, right? So let's assume and I have another one, maybe I have another coily brace, for one reason or the other. Let's say I have this is US citizen, right? So now the power of this guy can be accessed here. I can execute my power. This guy can execute his power here because it is global. It's more like the president. And this guy can execute his power only within this reach. And of course, this also is within this reach. So it can execute his power here and inside this. But this guy can only execute his power inside this reach, right? So this is more like a local government. I mean, a local government chairman. So a local government chairman or a county, maybe a mayor or something. I don't know. So, but my point is government chairman. Okay, chairman. So my point is the power of this particular guy, this particular variable is within this, and the power of this guy is within this, and the power of this guy is global. So it can be accessed anywhere. So let's assume I have a function. We are going to talk about function in later lectures. So let's assume I have a function. I can always access this, but I won't be able to access this guy. I won't be able to access this guy because they were declared in a local scope because this was declared here. So I can only access it within these parentheses, and for this it can only be accessed within these parentheses. So as we move forward, we understand what local variables and global variables are, so we're able to use that. Also, so another thing you should have in mind is that a global variable can have power in any scope, right? But at the same time, the power is limited. So if I'm to have another variable, let's say I'm to have another variable in here, I can always declare another variable of age in here, So let's assume I have this and I call this, let's say I call this maybe 44, 33. So I can always declare and initialize or whatever using this variable name again, and automatically this will override this. It's more like, yes, I understand your point. I understand you might argue that it's a local government chairman or a mayor, is he as powerful? Is he powerful to override the president command? No, but it can confidentially manipulate or stylishly or smartly manipulate the president's authority. For example, if the president is telling you that, you know what, shoot any of your citizen, any of your community member that transgress, maybe that refuse to stay calm, as the local government chairman, you know that you are responsible for these people. So yes, the president have authorized you to shoot anybody that is not quiet. Now, it is your choice. You can decide to follow strictly what the president has said, that okay, shoot anybody. But because you know that you are responsible for these people, you can adjust or smartly adjust this command. Okay, I'm meant to shoot you guys, but please, I don't want to shoot you guys. You know what? Let's just use maybe let's try to restrict them in some form of way that we do not need to shoot, right? Because at the end of the day, you will be responsible for them. So let's assume, even the president might eventually, take back his word. He might tell you that, yes, I might have said you should shoot them, but I do not really mean you should shoot them. So my point is, if a variable name is reused in a local scope, it will override the variable on the higher form if they are of the same name. So this will override this, right? So that is another thing you should have in mind. So so that is another thing you should have in mind. But one thing you are not allowed to maybe say age again. No, 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 you are not allowed. So you can only declare once in a particular scope. For example, you can't say this. No, you can't declare again once you declare in a particular scope. So even if you want to declare again, you can declare in another scope, just like I did here. What you can do, or what you are limited to do, you can reassign. For example, you already declare an initialize here, so you can reassign. This is allowed, but you are not allowed to declare and initialize again or declare and assign again. You are not allowed. So this is not allowed, but this is allowed, right? Also, this is allowed. So let's assume we have a variable declared in a scope. So if you go down to under scope, you can still reuse that variable name. So that is also allowed. So now let's quickly move on to another scope called static. So now let's talk about static, right? So now a static is more like an hybrid. So what this is doing is that you can declare a variable in a local scope, you know, but when you are out of that scope, you can still access that variable. For example, now, after declaring this is US citizen and age, within this scope, I cannot access it outside. For example, if I try to access, yes, I might be able to access this age and automatically I'll be getting this one. So let me try that. So I'll save and I'll compile. What do you expect? You can see 33, right? So which is the value of this guy. So even if I've declared it and I've assigned it here, you can see that I'm not getting 80, I'm getting. So now let me try to get this, right? So let's see. Do you think I'll be able to compile? No, I won't be able to compile. And that is because this variable that I'm trying to access was not declared within this scope, right? So it was declared within the scope. So I can only access it within the scope that it was declared. So but now I'm trying to access it outside. So I'll save and I'll compile. You can see I'm having an error, right? So what can I do to make this variable that was declared within a particular scope? What can I do to still be able to access the value so that it will I want it to maintain the value. So what I can do is I can add something called static. So before specifying data type, so you can specify static at the beginning, right? So you're telling me that, please, yes, I'm declaring within the scope, but I want to be able to I still want to be able to access this value, the value that is, assigned to this variable. I still want to be able to access it globally. So that is why I have to add static that, yes, I might be declaring within the scope, but I want to be able to access it everywhere. So let's assume we are in a function because this is going to be restricting us. So if we are in a function and we do such thing, we specify static behind any declared variable within that scope, within that function scope, we're able to access the variable in anywhere. It will keep the variable data in the memory. So we'll be able to access that variable anywhere, but because this is not a function, unless we choose to write it as a function. So I don't want to confuse you by writing a function. So I will just leave this out. But just have it at the back of your mind that we have something called static, right? That if you add it behind a particular data type, you'll be able to access it anywhere. So it is more like an hybrid. It's more like I want to be able to access it like a global variable, but of course it was not declared in a global manner. So that is what static is. Another thing is we have something called input, right? So let's have this. I'll add it here. So I'll say input. So now, what are input? Sometimes you want to take in values from your user. So for example, if you are familiar with using expert advisor, maybe you're a trader who have used automated program before, an EA, or maybe an indicator or so, you understand that it gives you room to give an input, right? So if you want to specify an input value, you have the room to do this. So how do you do this? So let's say I want to get in the age of my user. So instead of just specifying this, and add coding it, so I can say I'll just add input behind it. I'll say input. So now what this means is that I want to get a particular value called age, and it is going to be an integer, right? Then I want the default to be 33, right? So I can easily save and compile this. But let me take this out. So I will save and compile, and it is going to work. But let me tell you what you should be expecting. The variable, first thing first, I might not be able to get these inputs. And that is because I need to specify that I'm expecting an input here. So that is one thing. Another thing is that this particular, when you have an input, right, a variable that is in form of an input, any comment that is on the right hand side of it will be the name that is describing that variable. So let me save and compile. First thing first, you'll be able to input this because we need to specify something here, but I want you to see that, so that when you are trying to work on a project on your own and you realize that you're not getting the inputs popping up, it's not giving you a chance to enter an input, you should understand that, oh, this is the cause of the problem. Also, when you are having something, maybe you are getting the wrong descriptive name, you should also know the problem. So first thing, you can see that, yes, I'm trying to run this. Okay, let me clear this so that you can see. I'll clear this as well. So you notice that it is running. You can see I'm trying to run it, but it is not getting me something. So, and this is because I need to specify. Yes, we are in a script. When we are writing an expert advice, so we won't be having such problem. We won't need to specify this. So what we should have done, we should have specified property show inputs, right? So let me save and compile again. And when we go back, you can see now we have option. You can see we have option to specify. And like I said, you can see the comment that was on the right hand side of that input value is global. So we should have changed this to age or whatever descriptive name that we want to change it to. Now you can see we can change the variable. We can say no, it's not 20, it's not 33, it is 22, and we can say okay. So what we are going to do now is, first thing first, I'll change this. I'll say, what is your age? Your age, right? Then what I'll be doing now is I can say, okay, you know what, let's do this. I'll say, okay, let's remove this as well. You know what, let's remove everything. So I'll say age. So I'll print the age, right? So let me save and I'll compile, right? So first thing first, I'll launch this. I'll leave it on default. You can see the description, the name, the description has changed. So what is your name? What is your age? So the default is 33. So now, what do you think it is going to alert? Of course, 33. So now let me change the age. Let me change it to maybe 77 or 72. Okay, and I'll say okay. What is the alerting? 72. So you can play with this. So this is one way of getting values from your user. So you can see 21, and that is that. We have another one called S10, right? So we can say S10, maybe name. Let's take this to be name. So you can leave it on empty, or let's say John Doe. John Doe. So we can say, what is your name? So we can say, my name is, then you can say plus this particular name given by the user, right? So S10 is similar to input, but let's quickly see that. Let's quickly see the similarity so that you will be able to understand better what I'm about to explain. So I'll save and I'll compile, right? So you can see it is telling me that what is my name. Then let me click on OK. You can see it's telling me my name is John Doe. So let me try to change the name from the default. So I can say my name is Canyu. Then I'll say okay. You can see now the name has changed. So let me say my name is New York, or my name is Wall Street, Wall Street. Yes. So now you can see it is telling me my name is Wall Street. I hope you get the concept now. Now, the difference between the S10 and the input is that, so the S10 can be changed later on in the script. For example, I can reassign a value to this name. For example, I can still hard code this, maybe Juliet. So whatever value is specified here. So you know what? Let's do this. So my name is this, but I'll say before my name was, okay, let me say my name was. So what I'm trying to do is, first off, when the name is given to you, say my name was, then reassign this name. I'm hard coding this. Reassign this name you assign this Juliet value to this name, and tell me the new name. So that is what I'm trying to do. So I'll save and I'll compile, and that is only possible. I'm able to compile this because this is an extend. So if you want to take in an input that maybe you want to modify that variable, you want to take in a variable like a value from a user, but you want to take in a value from your user, but at the same time you still want to modify, you want to add something to it, you want to change it in some form, maybe you still want to work on it and still assign the result of that your workaround, you still want to assign it to that same variable, you can use extend. So now let's see that in action. You can see I will say, okay, let's keep it at on John Doe. So I'll say, okay, so it is telling me that my name was John Doe, which is the default, but I'm able to change it to Juliet, right? So that is it. My name was John Doe, but now I'm able to change it to Juliet. So that is that. So what if I try that with age? So let me say my age was, so I'll say my age was this age. So can I possibly change the age? So let me change the age to maybe 96 or 89. So my age is this. Can I possibly, in fact, do you think I'll be able to compile this? No, I won't be. So let me try to save and I'll compile. You can see I'm having a problem telling me that constant cannot be modified. So this is a constant. When yes, you can take in an input using the input keyword or the extend keyword, but you cannot modify whatever value that this variable contains. You cannot modify it anymore. So once you get the value, you cannot change it. But if you had used extend to take in the input, you'll be able to modify it just like you've seen. I was able to modify the name to Juliet, but I can't modify the age. And that is because I'm using input. So if you are sure that you won't be changing the value specified by the user that you're about to take in, then you should use input. But if you are sure that, okay, so I most likely will be changing the value that is specified by the user. Maybe you want to, maybe you want to do some calculation or, do some add up and still assign the value to your add up on that same variable, then you should consider using extend. Else you are going to have an error when you want to reassign a value to the input. These are means that which you can use in taking values or parameters from your user, and the difference, you have two options, which is input and extend. And if you are sure that you won't be reassigning anything to this variable, then you should use input. And if you know that you most likely will be working with this variable, you'll be trying to modify it just like we did, just as I've shown you so far, then you should use extend. Avoid input, else you are going to have this kind of error telling you that you cannot modify this because it is a constant. So the moment you specify this, that means you are specifying a constant. So now, what if you also have a variable that is not an input, but you intend not to change it? More like you do not want to mistakenly change it, or you want to make the compiler understand that I do not want to mistakenly change it, or I have no plan of changing it in any form, but you do not want it to be an input. So yes, that is also possible. What you can do is, let me first try to take this out. So that is when you can say, let's say you have a variable. All you need to do is, let's say you have a variable like maybe okay, let's do this. Let's say balance, right? Of course, you might want to change your balance. So let's say your balance is this. Let's say 9,000, right? So if you can, you can change this. You can reassign another value here. So let me try to reassign here, and I can call this balance. So I will save and I'll compile. You can see it is working fine. But the moment you specify that, oh, I have no plan of changing this, so it's no longer a variable. Yes, you might be declaring it as a variable. Yes, in general it is a variable. But if you know that, okay, you do not have intention of changing it, or you do not want to mistakenly change it, so you can simply say const. So the moment you had const behind your data type, you are trying to tell your compiler that, please, I do not want to change this by all in any form. So when I try to save and compile now, you can see it is telling me that it is giving me the same problem. So it's more like this is having an invisible const, in front of it. That is what it means. So, but this is also serving as an input, but this is not an input, right? Another example of const that you can have is maybe you can say const pi, but this will be in form of, you can, okay, let's say pi. I know what you understand what I mean by pi. 1 4, I think 2 blah blah blah, it's a lengthy number, it's a lengthy number. So let me just do this. So you can see this is 1. This is another example of pi. I mean, this is another example of a constant in mathematics. So okay, this is another constant that you can, maybe you are doing a calculation that include pi, something like that. So when you specify const in front of your data type when you are declaring, it means that you have no intention of changing these values in the future, right? So that is that. And that concludes this lecture. So I'll see you on the next one.